Hello, I'm going to say a few words. My name is Amankwa Baptiste. I am from Miami, Florida. This is my microphone. Is it working? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, I'm going to say a few words. Nice. My name is Amankwa Baptiste. I am from Miami, Florida. Perfect. Now you can have it. This is my microphone. Yeah. Now it's loud.
Do you want to stand on this side or this side? I normally stand here, but all your stuff is here, so maybe it makes more sense for you to be on this side today.
Okay.
If you prefer.
I have no preference. Just
Right, good morning. Thank you all for coming. It's very early, and every time I see people here, I'm very impressed. I'm Carolina. I'm from Skåne Startups. I work there as a venture advisor, and I'm also the person that coordinates the events that we host here. And this year, I've been trying to invite guest speakers from different startups so that we can get to know a little bit more on a personal level about the different startups. And this morning, we have Amankwa Baptiste from Seatrients.
hello.
And we're going to have a bit of a Q&A session, and then we will have our sort of standard mingling where you can grab some coffee from the other side, or luckily this morning we actually have some of the smoothies that Seatrients have, so you get an extra treat this morning to start the day with. So I have a long list of things here, so I'm going to have to, I'm afraid, refer a little bit to my sheet as I go through the morning, but a few housekeeping things, as Jenny, our manager, likes to say, is that we have toilets around the back. We will take photos and maybe some little videos. The event is live streamed through the Q&A. So if you don't want any pictures used afterwards for our marketing on social media, please let JP know. He'll be going around taking photos and things. And yes, and Skåne Startups, who are we and what do we do? We are basically kind of, I guess, a glue in the ecosystem, that we are a non-profit organization which tries to connect investors locally and globally to different startups in the Skåne region. There's a lot of funding that goes up to Stockholm and Gothenburg, and we're trying to help investors come and invest in startups here and sort of make the ecosystem here as vibrant as possible. And we also try and promote investment into startups that are maybe minority startups where women, for example, are running startups, and get less investment, and help them and promote them and support them, and support startups in general. So these mornings are like networking mornings where we get to meet different startups, we get to meet different entrepreneurs, different students, different investors, and connect with each other and have a little bit of a social time, because it's quite lonely as an entrepreneur of a startup sometimes. So that's the broad overview. So now for a little bit of a get to know with Amankwa. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me to be here. Is this on?
Yes, I think so.
Good.
So looking at your profile, you have quite a passion and background in sustainability. Going back to your bachelor studies, you had a lot of elective courses in sustainability. So I was wondering, where does this passion for sustainability come from?
To be honest, I found the passion in my studies. I'm a lot older than I look. So while I was doing my bachelor's, this was the early 2000s, sustainability wasn't really like a big topic of discussion. But I happened to get into a space where I wasn't really sure what I wanted in my university studies. I didn't know what my path was. So that led me to philosophy, and it was really great because the head of that department, she was really involved in environmental activism and sustainability, and she made a requirement every year that we, as a class, had to go on a retreat off the grid in the mountains of Tennessee and learn about sustainable concepts, sustainable construction, renewable energy, just the interdependence of society and the world, and like just understanding that our purpose here is bigger than like just the individual. Like that was like, you had to do that to pass her course. And I felt like it was so special that she created that space for students, because I would have never actually become inspired to dive deeper into what sustainability means, how it can be applied in the real world. And that's what made me kind of continue learning more and more about that, and what brought me here to Malmö. I came here to do my master's in leadership and sustainability, to kind of understand from an organizational perspective, like what can we really be doing to change our habits and our ways of using things and having a more interdependent type of approach to business. So that's kind of what led me here, is my studies.
And then your studies led you to creating Seatrients with your co-founder, which is, for those who have not heard or seen of Seatrients before, is a Cmos-based smoothie from a neutral tasting seaweed, which then is put into different smoothie flavors that you have.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly.
where did the idea of using Cmos come from, and why in a smoothie?
Yeah, okay. So my co-founder and I, we are both of Caribbean heritage. She's from St. Lucia. My family's from Trinidad and Tobago. And Cmos is a part of island culture. A big part of our culture is we work with what we've got. We're really creative, innovative people. And we've been farming and eating Cmos for many, many generations, which I thought was super interesting when I came into this context, because Sweden is quite surrounded by water, but there isn't this same type of culture or relationship with the water. And I met my co-founder in my studies here, and she had already finished a degree at Lund. So, I would go to her, I'd ask her to find certain things that I would be missing from Caribbean, or where can I find this or that? And we'd always talk about things that we missed or that we felt like was missing. And it helped us to kind of get into creating this product. The reason why we turned it into a smoothie is because that's how we do it in the Caribbean islands. We turn seaweed into drinks and beverages. We use it on our skin. We use it in gels, puddings, jellos. It's just something that we really are versatile with. But the most common way you'll see it is as a beverage. And I don't think anyone in this context has ever really engaged with seaweed in this type of way. So we thought it would be an interesting way to make seaweed more approachable and kind of share our culture, our background. Yeah.
I can definitely relate to the missing things from moving abroad, and that sort of being a motivation for looking for it and then starting a business from it, which is not the usual.
No,
but
I thought I was
exciting.
going to get into corporate. I thought I was going to, get this master's degree and go into some big corporation and do CSR for them and change the world. But what I realized is that wasn't really what I wanted, and I knew that there would be a point in which I would be demotivated in that type of space, because those cultures are really hard to infiltrate and influence. I became more interested in how to create new examples for them to follow or see, things that work, alternatives that work. I feel like that's more influential, and you see a lot of new companies coming up with new business models, with new ways of approaching business that I think in the long run will really affect larger companies. So yeah, I just thought it was a more meaningful way of applying the things I've learned, honestly.
I absolutely think that's a brilliant sentiment to have, to go with your heart and passion, as opposed to just going with the bank balance all the time.
No regrets. I mean, one thing that kind of motivated me to just be just focus on this and really give it a chance is because when everybody was affected by the pandemic, when life shut down, when everyone realized that even the people at the top of the top don't even have the answers, it just made me feel why not? It just made me feel why not me? Why can't I just try something for once? There's no one right way to do anything, and it's very obvious in this space and time. And I just sat with my co-founder and I was you know what? Let's just go for it. Let's just do it. Work really hard. See if it works. It works. If it doesn't, no regrets. And so that's just the space we're in right now. I mean, it's not easy working full-time on something that's not at a super profitable level yet, but I wake up every day and I do exactly what I want to do, and things that make me happy, and it's worth it to me.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So you said that the Cmos farming is part of the core sort of Caribbean life, that it's really part of the sort of sustaining I suppose, people's jobs, people's lifestyle, part of the culture there. But you also talk about the sustainability aspect of things. And if you're going to harvest things from the ocean or from anywhere, that it needs to be done in a careful and respectful and sustainable way. So with that said, how do you see the sort of sustainability aspect as you grow your business when you're using the Cmos and the Cmos farming part?
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because Cmos farming is something that they've always done for many, many years. And now that seaweed is becoming such a hot commodity, there is that potential that it can be overexploited or abused in a way. And we want to be really intentional about the way we source our seaweed, about the type of kind of network that we build throughout our supply chain. So we actually have a really close relationship with the farmers. We are starting only with farming associations that have been fully trained and understand how to sustainably farm and harvest the seaweed. And our next step is to kind of replicate this certification process so that other farmers, and we can organize and unionize farmers in developing island nations to be able to produce at the same standards so that they have the same access to the market. As things become more hot, as things become more regulated, people in marginalized areas become excluded from the market because they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the technology or resources to meet those standards. So a big part of what we do is like making sure that there is space for them, making sure that they are connected to what's happening in the Western world, and like making sure that as they grow and they scale, and as our company grows and scales, that they have equal access to the market, and there's opportunities for this to be replicated in other developing areas. So that's our plan. We're hoping to actually implement one of our first projects in the Caribbean next year. We want to develop like a biorefinery and start having some training facilities there to make sure that they are able to get the right knowledge and the right infrastructure to valorize their raw materials and become their own entrepreneurs. It's hard in the Caribbean. A lot of the economy is very reliant on tourism, almost 50%. And when tourism stops, the economy practically stops. So there needs to be other avenues that people can find opportunity there.
I was going to ask, like, on a more sort of broad sustainability basis, but I think part of that you've started answering. So my questions were sort of along the lines of what you see as the biggest issues to tackle within sustainability, but also which areas you think are the most important to tackle, which are being overlooked at the moment. And it sounds a little like you are not just considering where you're sourcing things from in terms of the actual raw product, but also the local environment that you're sourcing it from, and actually promoting opportunities for work and for growth of businesses in those areas. But do you have any other sort of, with regards to those questions, do you have any other sort of areas which you sort of see as the sustainability, big sort of solving problem bits?
Yeah, I mean, that aspect and what I was speaking about before is about social inclusion. I think a lot of people create sustainability concepts and they have such a hyper-local approach to it that they don't think about the bigger picture. And I think that is an aspect in sustainability that's often looked past. But along with that, I would say just having a more broad approach to food systems in general. Yes, we're trying to create healthier habits. Yes, we're trying to get more people on plant-based diets. But agriculture isn't as reliable as it seems to be. Our population is growing. We have to rethink our food systems in general. That means we need to shift the focus of where we're sourcing our food. And if no one is eating seaweeds or alternative plant-based proteins now, when it's a problem, it won't be able to be balanced or rectified. So a lot of what we do is just kind of trying to change the dynamic of how we approach foods, how we look at different alternatives as a food, and giving people access to products to actually start incorporating these type of things into their lifestyle. It has to start now, because by 2050, we definitely won't be able to feed everyone off of agriculture. So I think that's probably the biggest issue, is like really having a look at our food system as a whole, and kind of like trying to create more options and alternatives, and nudge customers and make them understand like we have to start making these choices now before it's too late.
So maybe also more insects, unfortunately, as well. Because I think that
Yeah.
was one of the other alternative food sources, which is used in other cultures a lot, but not necessarily in the Western world. So seaweed, insects,
Yeah, maybe,
other
perhaps.
things like that.
You should be able to have the choice
Yeah.
to. I mean, I've seen companies using insects to create food products for human consumption. I also see it being used as a fish and animal feed. There are ways that we can use these resources and still have the choice to have what makes us comfortable. We just have to be more aggressive about it, I think.
I have one question, which is maybe sounds like a slightly negative thing. The Caribbean's quite far away from Sweden.
Yeah.
And you're importing the Cmos presumably directly from there, where it's grown, and supporting that local ecosystem and that local business environment as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of a sustainability point of view and transporting everything long distances, do you see sort of a downside to that, or like how do you see that aspect being kind of tackled?
I mean, within every business, there are choices you have to make based on your values, your core values. And our core value is we don't want to exclude people from the market just because of where they are or what they have. We mitigate this by using the most sustainable forms of transportation, which is shipping. And that's how we mitigate that. But the customers who would choose our products, they're choosing it based on the value we create, based on our story, our mission. And whoever doesn't believe in that, then maybe they're just not our customer. But we're very intentional about why we're doing that, why we're starting with there. It doesn't mean we'll only be focused on them. It's just a starting point because that's our home. But it's not something that we see as a big issue, because there's so much more positive that can happen than negative by taking this approach.
And I suppose as green transport options become more and more readily available, then that's something which can be sort of utilized as a form of transporting it.
I mean, shipping is already the greenest form of transportation. We live in one of the most important type of harbor cities in Europe. If you go to the World Maritime University, they will tell you that there is no other form of transportation that is more sustainable than shipping. And they're already still working on making it even more sustainable. So we're always going to go with what is best for our values and also the most sustainable choice.
So now for a slightly different direction in the questioning. It's a food business at its core.
Yes.
But you, as far as I'm aware, haven't had sort of a culinary background behind you.
No.
So jumping from sort of the sustainability and maybe more of the corporate sort of side of things, going into a food business and looking at all of the things like certification, finding a good test kitchen, going out and sort of testing the product with customers and having the points of sale, and starting during a pandemic as well, where you don't necessarily have that openness of access. How did you go about like getting all your certification, finding a test kitchen to actually start doing your product preparation?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is being a food company in Malmö is not easy. There are a lot of resources that can help startups to develop their idea, challenge us to, find ways to identify proof of concept. But with regards to space, there is no true space for a food company to start and develop and test their product. Because of that, a lot of us startups kind of lean on each other to give each other like pointers of where we can find spaces to produce. There is two organizations that if you are a food company, I would definitely suggest for you to go to, and that is Crenova Food in Science Park and the Food Innovation Network. They are really good at, helping you understand how the food business works. They're really good at helping you to find partners along your value chain, and they're really helpful to find access to consultants and access to funding to get your products lab tested and things like this. But as far as like just having a space to start producing and going, you kind of have to be scrappy and figure it out on your, like as you go. I mean, we're always navigating in this. Our first kitchen, we found it through just like finding companies on Instagram and DMing them and saying, where do you produce? And eventually we were able to find a space in a shared kitchen where we were able to produce our first lines of products that we've sold. And now we need to expand our production capacity. So we're actually now looking for a larger space to continue to produce, and it's not that easy. But I will say lean into those resources because they will help you as much as they can. And also just don't be afraid to reach out to the startups around you. Everyone will know a little bit of what you don't know, and together we can figure out a lot more. So I do quite a bit of that. I reach out to people all the time, and we just kind of figure out things together. But it's not easy, I will say. Malmö, I know they're on their way to doing better, to making more space for food companies, because there are a lot here. I even was on a call with someone from Stockholm who does a lot of business, like analysts work, and she was saying a lot of food companies that she's seeing that are starting are coming from Skåne. So that should show that, you know, we need to start making more space. Food tech is becoming a bigger and trendier industry, and Malmö should be at the forefront of that because this is like one of the biggest startup ecosystems in Sweden. So hopefully in the next year we'll be seeing some interesting things that can happen with regards to that. But yeah, in the meanwhile, we are working together and figuring it out all together, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I can sort of, I've also been looking into food startup things in the past few months. And so this is why I was quite curious to ask you for your experience, because there's a lot of incubators and accelerators with office spaces and lab spaces.
Yeah.
In terms of kitchen spaces, that is something which is lacking. So I think any food startup that has made it to actually having a product going out to the people has made it quite a bit further than others that can't even find that kitchen space in the first
Just got to be scrappy and make it work.
So during the pandemic, there was a lot of restaurant closure, a lot of limited sort of event sizes. So getting out there to actually sell a product and get the product to the customers was quite tricky.
Yes.
You have an online shop, and I'm just wondering, in terms of the proportion of sales and access to customers, how much would you say your sort of revenue has come through having that revenue stream, the online sort of pre-booking, versus actually being able to get out to see people during these past few years?
Yeah, I will start by saying I have no benchmark to compare pre-pandemic because we started in the middle of the pandemic. So you're kind of forced to be online. But even beyond that, we actually wanted to be more of an online company so that we can be more international. But in order to reach our first customers, it doesn't just start online. We had to do a lot of networking. We had to go to food markets and just go rogue and like walk up and talk to people and give them samples and get booths at food markets. We started like that, getting a booth at a food market. We bottled up our products, and we just let customers name their price to just see if someone even wanted to buy it, what would they pay? From there, we decided, okay, the customer feedback has been really good. Let's think of a way to approach selling without exhausting too much of our resources. So that's why we decided to do the pre-orders, so we know what type of demand to anticipate. And that worked really well, but it also made us realize from an international perspective that having the product in a fresh liquid form, it would be a lot more tricky from a logistics perspective, and it made us go back into developing this as a powder. So it created a lot of learning experiences for us. It created a lot of access to customers actually engaging with our product and getting live and active feedback, and now we're ready to launch this product this year, and it wouldn't be possible without going through those pains of just trying to figure out how to access the customers. Now that we're online, a big element that we are wanting to kind of expand on is like really being clear about our story, our brand, our narrative, and like being able to connect with customers in a real way. And we want, you know, to kind of align that with the launch of our latest product. So I would encourage everyone to follow us online, Seatrients, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and just like join us on that journey. But most of our connections have been going out, talking to people, word of mouth, sharing our Instagram, posting a lot about our pre-orders, and that's when we would start getting the customers online. It didn't just start like only online, I will say.
I think it's probably quite difficult to be sort of found in the sort of, I don't know, the mess of online things.
Yeah.
So going out and letting people know, and then people can start
they come
finding
to
you.
find us.
And having something that they can share easily with friends to make sure more people find you.
Yes, and what's really good about that is like you see directly in your analytics like how it translates, and a lot of the data that we get, like after going to events and we see how many searches, we see how many people visited our site, how long they were there. It helps us to kind of adjust what type of events we go to. It helps us to adjust what type of advertising or messaging is working. So it also kind of helps us with our communication strategy, like figuring out who we need to be talking to and being more effective with that. So it's helpful.
I suppose it's nice having it set up fairly early on so that when you want to do this global reach, that you have a lot of those things in place already to be able to actually reach those customers.
Yes, that's true. It's a big part of why we want to be mainly e-commerce site, is so that we have direct contact with our customers. All the data that we receive, we can use to improve our products, to add services, to really understand what our customers are needing and responding to, and kind of adjusting as that goes along. It's a lot harder to have that understanding when you're only in retail, because they're the ones who are reaching your customers, not you directly. So it's I would say for those who have been in food businesses in like earlier years, they are a little like unsure about how e-commerce food companies work, but we're seeing a lot of really good examples now, especially in the pandemic, that it does work. People are shopping online more, as long as they find a certain level of comfortability with the feedback, with maybe the content, the values that the brand is communicating. They'll at least try it once, and we're hoping that that's how we can build like a recurring customer base coming directly to us.
I have so many more questions that I would like to ask, but I am aware that the list I sort of limited myself to has come to an end, and I also want to give our audience an opportunity to ask you things before we sort of wind down this Q&A session.
Okay.
So I'd like to thank you for answering my questions. I have to say you are very knowledgeable on all the things. I'm very impressed by your vision of the different aspects and how you see how different things being solved and the different problems that need to be solved. So I found that really refreshing. And I'd like to basically turn to the audience and ask if anyone has anything that they would like to ask. Of course, you can ask when we're off the live stream, but you're more than welcome to ask some questions now. Yes.
So I was just wondering, who is your target market?
So that's a good question. We see our target, like our niche customers, being vegans and vegetarians, mostly because there's a lot of research that shows seaweeds having a lot of nutritional value that is in lower availability in land-based plants. So we see that they're looking for more natural options of finding that. We also see like there is a market segment called the LOHAS. They are sustainability-focused, value-based type of consumers. Those are also our customers. We don't want to limit ourselves to a specific age group, but we feel like those who would adopt it first would be more millennial. The one thing we're unsure about, that I'll be very honest about, is if Sweden is our entry market or not. We think it's probably the UK, mostly because they do have a fast-growing vegan population, and along with that, they have the largest Caribbean community in the world. So when it comes to just like entering and finding the most customers in the beginning, it's probably going to be there. But we don't want to assume anything. Everything that we have planned, when you're planning in business, it's all assumptions based. So we're going to do a bit of testing in both areas and see where we're getting the most traction, and then build around from there. Yeah.
Which country exactly in the Caribbean is the seaweed exactly coming from?
I'm glad you asked that. So the seaweed is coming from the island of St. Lucia. My co-founder, Krishma, is from St. Lucia, and when we started thinking about the idea, she did a bit of research and she realized that that was the first island that is starting to certify and train seaweed farmers. So we decided to reach out and start engaging with them there, because we think it's a really good example they're creating, and we want to try to replicate that on other islands. So yeah, that's where we are now.
In the early days, when you're looking for a facility to develop the product, what equipment is important? Is it what you find in a normal commercial kitchen, or is it more of a lab-based equipment that you need?
I think it depends on the product, really. Every product has different requirements. Our product is, it doesn't require a lab setting fully. It actually requires a hybrid between a lab and a kitchen setting, in a sense, in the development phase. And when it gets to the production phase, it requires, even less of that lab aspect. But what we did was we found materials that were easy to work with in the beginning. We made the samples from there, and we worked our way back into defining like what type of processing steps we could use to make it in other forms. My business partner and co-founder is a biochemist who has worked with food production. So she already had a lot of that knowledge to understand what type of equipments we needed to start and to develop everything. But we started it with our home recipes from the Caribbean that we already been doing for many years, and then we kind of deconstructed it in a sense. So I don't know what's exactly you're working on, but it really, I would say if you have someone in your team, or if you have someone you can talk to about the type of product and get some advice on the equipment, then it can help guide you in a way. For us, we didn't know what we would need in the beginning, and we would talk to incubators that were more life science focused with only lab facilities. And well, honestly, that's, if you want a facility, that's almost kind of the only option, locally. It's either that or a co-working office space where they're mostly used to dealing with digital products. So yeah, honestly, there are things that are happening that hopefully will make it easier for product development in Malmö, but I would say first talk to one of the organizations that I mentioned earlier, Food Innovation or Cronova, and then they can get you a consultant to talk with you to understand what your production's needs are, because it changes. Yeah.
Do we have a final question at all? Or shall we? Yes?
Do you know if it's possible to farm the seaweed in Europe or some other place in the world as well?
It's not possible to farm this seaweed that we use for this product in Europe. It only grows in warm water. And also we value the concept of ocean-based farming because there is the element of farming to produce raw materials for ingredients, but there's also the element of ocean farming to capture carbon emissions. When you farm it out the water, you kind of lose that opportunity. I do know that when it comes to making nutraceuticals and health supplements, it has to be in a really controlled and clean environment. So in those instances, I would say land-based farming is what you should be doing, what you need to be doing. But for other type of applications, I would encourage people to farm in the ocean just because there's way more value that can be created outside of the product itself.
I have one last question, actually. I think I'm gonna be really cheeky because, yeah, I'm asking the question, so I'll take the last one. Okay. Just based on this, the shipping part and the ocean farming based, there have been these, this is more for fish farming, but maybe it's also applicable for the seaweed, I'm not sure. But these sort of biosphere or sphere, like ocean sphere type things, which then can be sort of placed anywhere out in the ocean, not necessarily just along a coast or near something, and then be transported to a location to make sure they're as fresh as possible. Is this something that you've looked at, and would it be applicable for sort of being able to grow seaweed sort of out in areas which are less utilized in general?
I'm sure it's applicable, but I don't know if it's necessary considering the bioavailability of seaweed. There are opportunities for, and space, enough space for all species of seaweeds to be grown in their natural environments, and it's more beneficial for them to grow in their natural environments because they affect the life that's happening within them. So I think it's actually a bit more effective from a
diversity perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To farm in the area where the seaweed is native. We got a lot of ocean surface. We only need about 2% of it to feed the whole world. So
wow.
We won't really need to have that level of farming if we are responsible and effective about how we approach it.
It's quite impressive that 2% is enough.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow. Right. Well, you have an opportunity. We're here for, I don't know what the time now is. I always get carried away with these mornings. But we have time. Grab coffee, grab some smoothies, talk to Amankwa about the product when you come up, and have a bit of mingle. And if you want to ask more questions, then feel free during that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I very much enjoyed learning more about it and everything. So yes. Thank you.